I don't know if anyone is going to actually read this. Maybe the internet connection up here is just another lie, like the job description, like the friendly smile on the ranger who drove me out here, or like the promise that I would be safe as long as I stayed inside the tower. But I have to try. I have to put this down in writing, if only to keep my own sanity from slipping off the edge of this damn mountain. If you are reading this, do not take the job opening at Blackwood Ridge. I don't care how many zeros are on the paycheck. I don't care if you're drowning in debt and this feels like a lifeline. It's not a lifeline, it's a lure, and I'm the fish that just bit down on the hook. My name is irrelevant now. Let's just say I was desperate. That's how they get you, right? It's never the people with trust funds and comfortable 9-to-5s who end up in places like this. It's the people like me. I was 3 months behind on rent, my car had just thrown a rod, and my credit score was low enough to dig a hole to China. I was scrolling through job boards at 3 a.m., eyes burning from the blue light, looking for anything that paid cash and didn't ask too many questions. That's when I saw it. Fire lookout needed, remote location, urgent placement, $4,000 per week plus completion bonus. I read it twice. $4,000 a week? For sitting in a glass box and watching for smoke? I did the math in my head instantly. 1 month up there would clear my debts. 2 months would set me up for a year. It seemed too good to be true. And deep down, in that primal part of my brain that warns you not to walk into a dark cave, I knew it was. But logic is a quiet voice when your stomach is empty and your landlord is threatening eviction. I applied. They didn't interview me. There was no background check, no drug test, no asking where I see myself in 5 years. I got an email 20 minutes later. It contained a set of coordinates, a time, and a digital contract. The email signature just said, Department of Forestry, Special Watch Division. I signed it. I packed a bag. I drove my dying car to the rendezvous point. The rendezvous was a gravel lot at the edge of the national park, the kind of place where the GPS signal just gives up and dies. A ranger was waiting for me. He was an older guy, skin like leather, eyes that looked like they hadn't blinked in a decade. He didn't introduce himself. He just tossed my duffel bag into the back of his Jeep and gestured for me to get in. The drive up the mountain took 2 hours. We didn't speak. Every time I tried to make small talk, to ask about the high pay or the specific duties, he just turned up the radio. But it wasn't music playing, it was just static. Low, rhythmic static. Like a heartbeat made of white noise.
When we finally stopped, the sun was already dipping below the tree line, casting long, twisted shadows across the trail. The tower stood above us, a spindly skeleton of steel and wood rising 60 feet into the darkening sky. It looked fragile. It looked lonely. The ranger handed me a heavy iron keyring and a walkie-talkie that looked like it was from the Vietnam War. He finally spoke, and his voice sounded like gravel grinding together. "Don't come down until the relief team radios you," he said. He wasn't looking at me. He was looking into the woods, scanning the tree line as if he expected something to charge out. Food is in the pantry. Water is in the tank. Generator has fuel for 6 weeks. There's a binder on the desk. Read it. Memorize it. Do not deviate from it. Before I could ask what he meant, he was back in the Jeep. He reversed so hard gravel sprayed my shins, and then he tore off down the mountain trail like the devil himself was snapping at his tires. I was alone. The climb up the stairs felt endless. The metal grated under my boots, sending echoes ringing out into the silent forest. When I reached the top and unlocked the trapdoor, the air inside the cabin was stale, smelling of old pine, dust, and something copper-like, maybe rust, maybe old dried blood. It was a standard lookout tower, a cot in the corner, a propane stove, a wraparound deck, and windows on all 4 sides, a fishbowl in the sky. The view was breathtaking, miles of endless green turning to black as night fell. But I wasn't looking at the view. I was looking at the desk. Right in the center, next to a dusty CB radio, was a thick black binder. Taped to the front cover was a handwritten note in frantic, jagged cursive. It read, "To the new guy, I'm sorry. I needed the money too. Follow the list or you won't make it to payday." I laughed. I actually laughed out loud. It sounded hollow in the glass box. I thought it was a prank, some hazing ritual for the rookie. I sat down in the creaky swivel chair, cracked open a bottle of water, and opened the binder. The first page wasn't a manual on how to spot smoke or triangulate coordinates. It was a list of rules. And as I read them, the hair on my arms began to stand up one by one. Rule 1. Keep the trapdoor locked at all times between sunset and sunrise. Check the lock 3 times. If you hear scratching on the wood from underneath, do not investigate. It is not a raccoon. Raccoons do not know how to test door handles. Rule 2. The radio is your only link to the outside world, but you are only to answer calls from Ranger Station 4. If you hear a voice claiming to be your mother, your father, or a partner, turn the volume to 0 immediately. Do not speak to them. Do not let them know you are listening. They can hear your breathing. Rule 3. You will see lights in the woods. Sometimes they look like flashlights. Sometimes they look like campfires. Do not use your binoculars to inspect them. If you focus on them, they will notice you. If the lights start moving toward the tower, turn off your lantern and lie flat on the floor until sunrise. Rule 4. There is no basement in this tower. If you wake up and see a staircase leading down that wasn't there before, close your eyes and count to 10. If you open them and the stairs are still there, you have fallen asleep on duty. Pinch yourself until you wake up. If you don't wake up, pray. Rule 5. Every Tuesday at 3:33 a.m., the phone on the wall will ring. There is no phone line connected to this tower. Let it ring. If you answer it, the person on the other end will ask you for permission to enter. They are very polite. They are very convincing. Do not give them permission. Rule 6. If you see a man in a yellow raincoat standing at the edge of the clearing looking up at you, wave to him. You must wave. If you ignore him, he will take it as an invitation to come up the stairs. He hates being ignored. He does not like the stairs, but he will climb them if he feels disrespected. Rule 7. The wildlife here is wrong. You might see deer walking on their hind legs. You might see owls with human faces. Do not react. Treat them as normal animals. If you scream, they will know you are not from here. You need to blend in. You are just part of the ecosystem now. Rule 8. Check the wind speed gauge every hour. If the wind stops completely, I mean dead silence, no rustle in the trees, no creaking of the tower, hide in the supply locker. Something is passing through the clearing that is too big for the trees to hold. Wait for the sound of breaking timber before you come out. Rule 9. Do not look at the moon if it appears red. It isn't the moon, it's an eye. Rule 10. If you survive the first week, you will find a bonus check in the supply drop. Do not spend it immediately. You will need it for therapy. I stared at the paper. My hands were trembling. I wanted to believe it was a joke. I wanted to believe the previous guy was a creative writer with too much time on his hands. But then I looked out the window. The sun was gone now. The forest was a sea of ink. And down there, right at the edge of the clearing, where the trees met the gravel patch, standing perfectly still in the darkness, was a figure. It was wearing a yellow raincoat. It was looking up. I froze. My heart hammered against my ribs like a trapped bird. Rule 6. If you see a man in a yellow raincoat, wave to him. My brain screamed at me to hide, to duck below the window, to lock the door and never open it. But the instructions were clear. He hates being ignored. Slowly, with a hand that felt like it belonged to a corpse, I raised my arm. I gave a small, shaky wave. The figure in the raincoat stood there for a moment, motionless. Then, slowly, it raised a stiff arm and waved back. The movement was wrong. It was too fluid, like there were no bones in the arm, just cartilage and jelly. Then, he turned and walked back into the tree line, vanishing into the dark. I let out a breath I didn't know I was holding and scrambled backward, away from the glass. I scrambled for the trapdoor to make sure it was locked. I checked it once, I checked it twice,
I checked it 3 times. Rule 1, check the lock 3 times. I sat with my back against the metal cabinet, clutching the binder to my chest. I looked at the digital clock on the console. It was 8 p.m. I had 10 hours until sunrise. And then the radio crackled to life. "Hey, honey," a voice said. It sounded exactly like my mom who died 3 years ago. "It's cold out here. Can you let me in?" I stared at the radio dial. My hand hovered over the volume knob. "They can hear your breathing." I held my breath. I turned the knob to 0. The voice cut out, but the silence that followed was heavier than any sound I had ever heard. I am writing this now because I need to stay awake. I have a pot of coffee brewing, but the smell is making me nauseous. The woods outside are silent, too silent. I haven't heard a cricket or a bird since the sun went down. I just checked the wind gauge. It's reading 0. And from the bottom of the stairs, 60 feet down, I just heard the heavy, wet sound of a boot hitting the first metal step. Clang, clang. Someone is coming up, but the trapdoor is locked. I checked it 3 times. Wait, I hear scratching, not on the trapdoor, on the glass. Something is scratching on the outside of the glass windows. I'm 60 feet in the air. Nothing should be able to reach the windows. I'm not going to look. I'm going to keep typing. If I look, I might see what's making that sound. And if I see it, I have a feeling it will see me. The scratching is getting louder. It sounds like fingernails, long, hard fingernails tapping a rhythm. Tap, tap, tap. It's mocking me. I shouldn't have taken the money. I shouldn't have taken the job. If you find this transcript, if you find this laptop, tell my sister I'm sorry. And whatever you do, don't look at the lights in the woods. Because right now, the entire tree line is glowing and the lights are moving toward the tower. The pay was $18 an hour to sit in a glass box 60 feet above the ground and watch trees not burn. That was the pitch. They told me it was quiet. They told me it was the perfect job for a guy like me, someone who needed to get away from the noise of the city, from the debt collectors, from the memories of the accident. I drove 6 hours into the heart of the Shoshone National Forest, parked my truck at the trailhead, and hiked the last 2 miles up with my rucksack. When I climbed the metal stairs of Tower 4, the wind was already howling, rattling the steel cage like it was trying to shake a tick off a dog's back. The guy I was replacing wasn't there. The door was unlocked, swinging slightly in the breeze. Inside, the place was a mess. Coffee cups with mold growing in them, wrappers on the floor, and a sleeping bag that looked like it had been shredded by a weed whacker. But on the center desk, right next to the dusty Osborne firefinder, was a heavy black binder. It looked official, standard issue government stationery. I sat down, shaking the cold from my bones, and opened it. The first page wasn't a welcome letter. It wasn't a map. It was a single sheet of yellow legal paper, handwritten in frantic, jagged ballpoint pen. The header simply read, "The Rules." I thought it was a prank, hazing for the new guy. But as I read them, the silence of the woods around me started to feel heavy. It felt like the trees were leaning in, pressing against the glass, reading over my shoulder. I am reading this to you now so you understand why I am not unlocking the door. I am reading this so there is a record. Here is what the list said. Rule number 1. The radio is your lifeline, but it is also a liability. During daylight hours, between 6 a.m. and 8 p.m., you are to keep the receiver tuned to Channel 9 for ranger station updates. However, the moment the sun dips below the tree line, you must turn the radio off. Not down, off. If you leave it on, you will hear static. Eventually, that static will start to sound like a voice you recognize. It might be your mother. It might be your ex-wife. It might be a child crying for help. Do not answer it. Do not speak to it. The ranger station does not transmit at night.
If you answer, it locks onto your signal, it learns your location, and it climbs fast. Rule number 2. You are the only fire lookout in this sector. There is a tower visible to the north on the peak of Black Ridge. You will see it clearly during the day. It is an old wooden structure, abandoned since 1985. If you look through your binoculars at night and see a light in the north tower, drop to the floor immediately. Crawl to the center of the room and cover your head.
Do not look at the light. Do not try to signal it with your flashlight. Whatever is in that tower is looking for someone to look back. If it sees you seeing it, the game is over. Stay on the floor until sunrise. Rule number 3. The local wildlife is aggressive but manageable, with one exception. You may see a herd of elk in the clearing at the base of your tower. This is normal. Watch them, count their legs. If you see an elk that is standing on its hind legs, or if you see a deer walking with the stiff, jerky movements of a marionette puppet, close the blinds. Real animals do not walk like men. Real animals do not have joints that bend backward. These are mimics. They are trying to lure you down. They will scream in voices that sound like human agony. Ignore them. If you acknowledge them, they will start to climb the stairs. Rule number 4. Speaking of the stairs, this tower is 60 feet high. There are exactly 88 metal steps leading up to the catwalk. Every time you go down to use the outhouse or retrieve supplies from the pulley system, count the steps. Count them out loud. If you count 88, you are safe. If you count 89, stop immediately. Do not take another step. Close your eyes, grip the railing, and walk backward up the stairs until you reach the catwalk again. An extra step means space has been distorted. If you step on the 89th stair, you will not land on the ground. You will land somewhere else, somewhere cold, somewhere you cannot come back from. Rule number 5. You may hear knocking on the trapdoor or the windows. I need you to use your logic here. I need you to remember where you are. You are 60 feet in the air. There is no balcony. There is no ladder on the glass. Birds do not knock 3 times in a rhythmic pattern. The wind does not tap politely. If you hear knocking, do not look at the source. Fix your eyes on your boots, turn up the propane lantern until the hissing sound drowns out the tapping. If you look at the window, you will see a face. It will be pale, it will be smiling, and it will be far too wide to be human. If you make eye contact, the glass will not hold. Rule number 6. There is a supply cache under the cot. In it, you will find a flare gun, 3 flares, and a bottle of high-proof whiskey. The whiskey is not for drinking. The flares are not for signaling to rangers. If the door handle begins to turn and you know you locked it, if the radio turns itself on and starts screaming your name, if the smell of sulfur and rotting meat fills the cabin, you are to take the whiskey, douse the room, and use the flare gun on the floorboards. Fire is the only thing they fear. It is better to burn the tower down with you inside it than to let them take you alive. Trust me. You do not want to see what they do with the ones they take alive. Rule number 7. Do not trust your replacement. If you wake up and see a man standing in the corner of the room wearing a Forest Service uniform, ask him for the time. If he tells you the time, he is real. If he smiles and says, "Time is a construct," or if his mouth doesn't move when he speaks, use the flare gun. The shift change doesn't happen for 2 weeks. No one comes up here early. No one. I finished reading the list. I laughed. I actually laughed out loud. I thought it was creative writing. I thought the last guy was trying to scare me off so he could get his job back. I tossed the binder onto the desk and stood up to look out at the view. The sun was just starting to set, painting the sky in bruises of purple and red. I looked to the north, toward Black Ridge. The old wooden tower was there, just like the note said. Silhouette against the dying light. Empty. Abandoned. I grabbed my binoculars to get a better look, just to prove to myself that this was all nonsense. I focused the lenses. The North Tower wasn't empty. There was a light on inside, a bright, artificial red light. And standing in the window of that tower, miles away, was a figure. It was holding a pair of binoculars, and it was looking right at me. The radio behind me clicked on. I didn't turn it on. I swear to God I didn't touch it. Static filled the small glass room, thick, wet static. And then, through the speaker, a voice. My voice. It said, "I see you." I'm under the desk now. I have the flare gun in my hand, and I hear footsteps on the metal stairs. 1, 2, 3. I'm counting them. There are supposed to be 88. He's on step 90. I need to emphasize something before I tell you what happened up there. There is a specific kind of silence that only exists in deep wilderness. Most people think silence is just the absence of noise, but it's not. Not out here. In the national parks, specifically in the sector I was assigned to, silence is a weight. It presses against your eardrums. It has a physical density, like water pressure. When you are 70 feet in the air, sitting in a glass box roughly the size of a master bedroom, that silence becomes a living thing. I took the job because I needed the money and the solitude. My life back in Chicago had imploded. Divorce, debt, the usual suburban collapse. And the idea of spending 3 months staring at trees seemed like a paid vacation from my own misery. I didn't believe in ghosts. I didn't believe in cryptids. I didn't even really believe in the stranger danger stories about the stairs in the woods. I was a rational man, a logical man. That lasted exactly 6 hours. The hike up to Tower 4 was grueling. The trail hadn't been maintained since the late 90s. The ferns were waist-high and smelled of rot and wet earth. By the time I reached the clearing, the sun was already dipping below the ridgeline, casting long, bruised shadows across the valley. The tower itself looked wrong. That's the only way I can describe it. It was a standard air motor tower, steel lattice rising into the sky, topped with a white cab. But it looked too clean. In a forest that was constantly decaying and regrowing, covered in moss and lichen and bird droppings, the tower was pristine. The metal didn't gleam, it absorbed the light. It looked like a glitch in the render, like it had been cut and pasted from a different photograph. I climbed the stairs. There were 88 of them. I counted. Rule number 4 in the manual they gave me said to always count the stairs on the way up. And if the number ever exceeded 88, I was to immediately close my eyes and sit down until I heard a bird chirp. I thought it was a hazing joke, a way to mess with the newbie. But as I climbed, my boots climbing against the metal grates, the sound didn't echo. The forest absorbed the metallic ring instantly. I unlocked the trapdoor and pushed my way into the cab. This is where the atmosphere shifted. This is what you need to understand about fire lookouts. They are the ultimate liminal space. You aren't on the ground, so you aren't part of the forest. You aren't in the sky, so you aren't part of the air. You are suspended in a glass cage, trapped between 2 worlds. The interior was frozen in time. A metal cot in the corner with a wool blanket that smelled of dust and ozone, a propane stove. A ham radio that hummed with a low electrical thirst, even though it was turned off. And in the center, the Osborne Firefinder. It's a large, circular map table with a sighting device used to pinpoint smoke. The first thing I noticed was the smell. It didn't smell like pine or fresh air. It smelled like old electricity, like the back of a warm television set from 1995. I set my bag down. The sound was too loud in the small space. I walked to the windows. The cab is surrounded by glass, 360 degrees of visibility. As the sun set, the glass stopped being a window and started becoming a mirror. That is the first psychological break you experience on a night shift. When it is dark outside and you have a lamp on inside, you can't see the woods anymore. You only see yourself reflected 4 times, staring back at you from every direction. You are in a fishbowl. Everything in the woods can see you, the bright, glowing man in the sky tower, but you can't see them. I settled in. I made coffee on the propane stove. The blue flame hissed, the only sound in the world. I sat at the desk and opened the binder they had left for me. The cover was plain brown leather, no markings, just the list of rules taped to the inside cover. I read them again, trying to laugh it off, but the silence was making it hard to find the humor. Rule 1. Keep the door locked from sundown to sunup. Do not open it for any voice, even if it sounds like your supervisor, even if it sounds like your mother. Rule 2. If you see a second moon in the sky, do not look at it directly. Use your peripheral vision to close the blinds on the east side. Rule 3. The Osborne Firefinder is a tool. If the crosshairs move on their own, do not correct them. They are tracking something you cannot see. I looked at the Firefinder in the center of the room. It was a heavy cast iron instrument. It hadn't moved. It looked solid, cold. But as I stared at it, I got that feeling you get when you walk past a mannequin in a department store and your brain sends a little spike of adrenaline to your heart because for a split second you thought it was a person. The equipment felt aware. The temperature dropped. I put on my jacket. I tried to read a book, but my eyes kept darting to the windows. The reflection of the room created an infinite tunnel effect. Me, the cot, the radio, the darkness. Me, the cot, the radio, the darkness. Around 11 p.m., the isolation hit its peak. It's a physical sensation. Your brain starts to panic because there is a lack of sensory input. It starts to invent things. I began hearing a frequency, a high-pitched whine right at the edge of hearing. It sounded like a dog whistle. It seemed to be coming from the radio, but the radio was dead silent. I stood up to stretch, and my shadow stretched with me, playing across the glass. I walked to the north-facing window. Below me, the canopy of the forest was a solid ocean of black ink. No definition, no trees, just a void. Then, I saw the light. It was faint, a single pale yellow dot, miles out in the deep woods. No trails went out there, no campsites. It was the no-go zone, marked in red on the map. I grabbed the binoculars. My hands were shaking, just a little. I focused the lenses. The light wasn't a flashlight. It wasn't a campfire. It was steady, unwavering. It looked like a porch light, a standard suburban porch light, hovering about 10 feet off the ground, floating in the middle of nowhere. I lowered the binoculars, rubbing my eyes. Maybe it was a reflection. Maybe it was a star low on the horizon. I looked again. It was closer. Not moving closer, it had just skipped, like a bad video edit. 1 second it was 5 miles out, the next it was 3 miles out. I backed away from the window. I bumped into the Osborne Firefinder. The metal was freezing cold, colder than the air in the room. I looked down at the sighting mechanism. It had rotated. I hadn't touched it, I hadn't been near it, but the brass sight was now pointed directly north, directly at the light. My heart was hammering against my ribs like a trapped bird. I remembered Rule 3. If the crosshairs move on their own, do not correct them. I stepped away from the table, my back hitting the glass of the south window. I felt exposed. I felt like a specimen in a jar. The silence outside seemed to vibrate now. The pressure in the air increased, popping my ears. I needed noise. I needed to hear a human voice. I reached for the radio handset. I was going to call Central. I didn't care if I sounded like a coward. I pressed the button. Tower 4 to Central, do you copy? Static. Not the chaotic crackle of interference, but a smooth, rhythmic static, like breathing. Tower 4 to Central, I have a visual on an unauthorized light source in Sector North. Please advise. The static stopped, abruptly. Total silence. Then, a voice came through. It wasn't the dispatcher. It wasn't human. It sounded like a collection of sounds spliced together to form words. A dog barking cut short, a car door slamming, the crunch of leaves, all mashed together to mimic speech. Do not look at the stairs, Tower 4. I dropped the handset. It dangled by its cord, swaying back and forth like a pendulum. I stood in the center of the glass box, paralyzed. The stairs. The trapdoor was in the floor, in the corner. It was solid wood. I couldn't see through it, but I could hear. Something was on the metal grate. Clang. Pause. Clang. Heavy boots, wet boots, ascending. I looked at the window again.
The light in the woods was gone. The forest was pitch black. But in the reflection of the glass, I saw something behind me. In the reflection, the interior of the tower wasn't empty. There was someone sitting on the cot, just sitting there, stiff, upright, facing the corner. I spun around. The cot was empty. The wool blanket was smooth. I looked back at the reflection. The figure was still there. This is what liminality does to you. It strips away your ability to trust your own senses. You start to doubt the geometry of the room. You start to doubt that the floor is solid. The air in the cab tasted like copper now, the taste of blood in your mouth when you run too hard in the cold. Clang. The footsteps were halfway up. I grabbed the rulebook. My fingers fumbled with the pages. I needed to find a rule for this. There had to be a rule for this. Rule 7. If you hear someone climbing the stairs and you have not received a radio call announcing a visitor, turn off all the lights, lie on the floor, cover your ears, do not look at the trapdoor. I killed the lantern. The darkness was absolute. The moon was hidden behind clouds. The only light came from the faint green glow of the radium dials on the radio equipment. I lay on the floorboards. The wood was rough against my cheek. I could smell the dust between the cracks. I squeezed my eyes shut. I covered my ears with my hands, pressing hard until I could hear my own blood rushing. But I could still feel the vibrations. Thump, thump, thump. They weren't stopping at the landing. They were coming all the way up to the catwalk. The footsteps stopped right outside the door. I held my breath. I held it until my lungs burned. I waited for the knock. I waited for the handle to turn. But there was no knock. Instead, something brushed against the glass. It sounded like wet skin sliding against a window pane. It started at the door and began to move around the perimeter of the cab, slowly, circling me. I was lying in the dark and something was walking around the outside of my glass cage, 70 feet in the air, running its hand along the windows. I opened my eyes, just a slit. I was facing the east window. Against the faint gray light of the night sky, I saw a silhouette. It was tall, too tall. The proportions were wrong. The arms hung down too low, past the knees. It didn't have a neck. The head just sat directly on the shoulders. It stopped. It was standing right in front of me, separated only by a 1/4 inch of vintage glass. It didn't have a face. It just had a smooth, pale surface where features should be. But I knew it was looking at me. I could feel its gaze like a laser pointer on my forehead. I remembered the reflection I had seen earlier, the figure on the cot. I realized then that the figure hadn't been a ghost inside the room. It was a reflection of what was waiting outside. It had been out there the whole time, waiting for the sun to go down. The thing tapped on the glass 3 times, slow, deliberate. Tap, tap, tap. The glass didn't vibrate. The sound didn't come from the outside. The sound came from inside my head. I squeezed my eyes shut again and started reciting the alphabet backwards. I focused on the logic. I focused on the structure. Z, Y, X, W. I lay there for hours. My body went numb. The cold seeped into my bones. The sliding sound continued, circling, 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 like a shark swimming around a diver's cage. Eventually, the darkness began to lift. The gray of pre-dawn started to bleed through the windows. The circling stopped. I didn't move until the sun was fully over the horizon. When I finally sat up, my joints popped. The room was bright. The air was warm. The radio was silent. I stood up and walked to the window. There were no prints on the catwalk, no mud, no scratches on the glass.
But then I looked at the Osborne fire finder. The dust cover, which I had left on the desk, was draped over the sighting mechanism. And written in the dust on the surface of the map table, in perfect, careful letters, was a message. I can see you blink. I'm writing this down now because my shift isn't over. I have 89 more days. I can't leave. If I leave, I breach the contract. And rule number 10 says that if you breach the contract, the protection of the tower is revoked. I don't know what that means, but as I look out at the tree line today, under the bright, cheerful sun, the trees don't look like trees anymore. They look like the bars of a cell. And I think I can hear the static starting again.
I'm writing this with shaking hands. The sun is up now, but the cold is still in my bones. It's deep in the marrow. If you are reading this, maybe you're thinking about taking that seasonal job with the Forestry Service. Maybe you like the idea of isolation, the romantic notion of a fire lookout tower high above the tree line, watching over the world. Don't do it. Or if you do, memorize the list, burn it into your brain, because last night I slipped up. I got comfortable and I breached rule number 9. Let me set the scene so you understand the gravity of the mistake. It was 03 hours, the dead of night. In the tower, the windows are everywhere. You live in a glass box. During the day, it's a panoramic view of God's country. At night, it's a fishbowl. You can't see out because of the reflection of the interior lights, but everything in the woods can see in. That's why rule number 2 is to keep the lights off after dusk, total blackout. I was sitting in the dark. The only light came from the dials of the radio and the faint glow of the stars through the glass. I was tired, not just sleepy, but that heavy spiritual exhaustion that comes from being the only human being for 50 miles. I was staring out at the northern ridge, scanning for spot fires, though honestly, I was just spacing out. That's when I heard it. It wasn't a roar, it wasn't a scream. It was the sound of metal on metal, the groan of the catwalk grating outside the tower. Rule number 4 states clearly, the stairs will rattle in the wind, ignore it. But if you hear footsteps on the catwalk that do not match the rhythm of your own heart, do not acknowledge them. I know the sound of the wind. This wasn't wind. This was weight, heavy, wet weight placing pressure on the steel grid. 1 step, pause. 2 steps, pause. I froze. I stopped breathing. My training kicked in, but my lizard brain was screaming. I sat in my swivel chair, facing the north window. The trapdoor to the tower, the only way in or out, was behind me, to my south. The footsteps circled. They were slow, deliberate. They sounded like wet meat slapping against the iron. Slap, clank, slap, clank. I stared at the tree line. I focused on a single pine tree silhouetted against the navy blue sky. I counted the branches. 1, 2, 3. The footsteps stopped directly behind me, outside the glass. I knew there was only a pane of glass separating me from whatever was out there. I could feel the temperature drop, not a ghostly chill, but a physical displacement of air. The pressure in the cabin changed. My ears popped. Then came the tapping. 3 slow taps on the glass, right behind my head. Tap, tap, tap. Rule number 9, the most specific rule in the binder.
If you sense a presence on the catwalk, fix your eyes on the horizon. If you see a reflection in the glass that does not belong to you, close your eyes. Under no circumstances are you to turn around. Under no circumstances are you to look back. I was doing good. I was holding it together. I was a statue. But then the radio crackled. It wasn't static. It was a voice, clear as day. It was my voice. The radio, sitting on the desk in front of me, spoke in my exact cadence. It said, "Hey buddy, it's me. Look at this." It was a reflex, a stupid human reflex. The voice was so jarring, so impossible, that I didn't turn my body, but I flinched. My eyes darted from the tree line to the reflection in the window in front of me. I looked at the glass. I saw the reflection of the room behind me. And I saw it.
In the reflection, standing on the catwalk outside the southern window, was a shape. It looked like a man, but stretched, like someone had taken a person and pulled them like taffy. The limbs were too long, the joints bent the wrong way. The skin was pale, luminously white, like the belly of a dead fish. But the face, God, the face. It didn't have features. It had a smooth surface of flesh where eyes and a mouth should be. But as I watched the reflection, the flesh tore open, a vertical slit down the center of the face. I made eye contact with the reflection. I broke rule number 9. The thing in the reflection stopped moving. The slit on its face widened. It knew I had seen it. Panic is a cold bucket of water. It washes away logic. I wanted to scream. I wanted to grab the flare gun, but I couldn't move. My muscles were locked in a chemical rigor. The radio crackled again, my voice, but this time it was laughing, a dry, wheezing laugh. He looked, he looked, he looked. The glass behind me shattered. It didn't break inward, it didn't explode. It just disintegrated, falling away like sand. The sound was deafening in the silence. The wind rushed in. It smelled like copper and ozone, like an old battery that had burst. I squeezed my eyes shut. I slammed them shut so hard I saw stars. I remembered the addendum to Rule 9, a handwritten note in the margin of the manual, scrawled by the guy who had this job before me, the guy who went missing. It read, "If you breach, play dead, become furniture. If you do not react, it cannot feed." I sat in the chair, eyes closed, hands gripping the armrests so hard my knuckles turned white. I heard the wet slap of feet on the wooden floorboards of the cabin. It was inside. It was in the room with me. I held my breath. I held it until my lungs burned, until my chest spasmed. I forced myself to take tiny, shallow sips of air through my nose. The smell was overpowering now. Rotting leaves and stagnant water. I felt it move around the desk. I could hear the joints popping like dry knuckles cracking with every movement. Pop, click, slap. It stopped beside me. I could feel the heat radiating off it. It wasn't cold anymore. It was hot, feverishly hot, like a sick animal. It leaned in. I could feel its breath on my ear. It didn't breathe air, it breathed moisture. Warm, damped condensation hit the side of my neck. "Open," it whispered. The voice wasn't mine anymore. It sounded like two stones grinding together. "Open your eyes," it mimicked. I didn't move. I focused on the math. I started doing multiplication tables in my head. 7 times 7 is 49. 8 times 8 is 64. I built a wall of numbers in my mind to hide behind. A hand touched my shoulder. It had too many fingers. I could feel them wrapping around my deltoid. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7 fingers. They were long and cold, pressing into the muscle, testing the meat. It squeezed. Pain shot down my arm, sharp and electric. It was trying to get a reaction. It wanted me to pull away. It wanted me to scream. If I acknowledged it, I was dead. I knew that with a certainty that went beyond logic. I went limp. I forced every muscle in my body to surrender gravity. I became a sack of meat in a chair. The grip tightened. I felt a fingernail, sharp as a scalpel, puncture my shirt and dig into my skin. I felt a trickle of warm blood run down my arm. 9 times 9 is 84. No, 81. Focus. 9 times 9 is 81. The creature shifted. It moved behind the chair. It placed both hands on the backrest. I could hear the wood of the chair groaning under the pressure. It leaned over the top. Its face, that vertical slit, was inches from my forehead. I could hear the wet sound of the opening expanding and contracting. "I can see you in there," it whispered. This time, the voice sounded like my mother. That was the hardest part. It sounded exactly like her. The tone she used when I was a kid and I was pretending to be asleep so I wouldn't have to go to school. "I can see you in there, honey. Open up." Tears leaked out of my closed eyes. I couldn't stop them. My body was betraying me. The creature made a sound of delight, a chittering noise. It licked the tear from my cheek. Its tongue was rough, like sandpaper, but hot and slimy. "Salty," it said. I bit the inside of my cheek. I bit it until I tasted copper. I used the pain to ground me. The pain was real. The voice was a trick. We stayed like that for an eternity, the creature hovering over me, touching my hair, tapping my collarbone, whispering names of people I loved, whispering secrets I had never told anyone. It told me how I felt when my dog died. It told me about the time I stole money from my dad's wallet. It knew everything. It was digging through my memories, looking for a nerve to pull. I just kept counting. 12 times 12 is 144. Then the sun. I didn't see it, but I felt it. The air in the cabin changed. The fever heat of the creature began to fade. The birds started to sing in the trees below. The creature let out a hiss, a sound of pure frustration. "Next time," it whispered. I felt the weight leave the back of the chair. I heard the wet footsteps retreat. Slap, click, slap. I heard the sound of the metal grating on the catwalk. Then silence. I didn't open my eyes for another hour. I sat there, bleeding, freezing, bathed in the morning light, terrified that it was a trick. When I finally opened them, the cabin was empty. The glass behind me was gone, just a gaping hole in the frame. The floor was covered in wet, muddy footprints that had 6 toes. I radioed base. I told them a bear broke the window. I lied. If I told them the truth, they'd send a rescue team. And if a rescue team came up here, fresh meat for the grinder, I don't think the thing in the woods would wait for nightfall. I taped up the window with plastic sheeting. I cleaned the floor with bleach. I burned my shirt. I have 3 more nights on this shift. I can't leave. Rule number 1 says the post must never be abandoned until the relief arrives. If I leave, the protection of the tower breaks, and I'll never make it to the truck. I'm sitting here now. It's noon. The sun is high, but I can see something at the tree line, just at the edge of the clearing. It's standing in the shade, a tall, pale shape. It's not moving. It's waiting. I have to go now. I need to reinforce the door. I need to check the generator. And whatever you do, if you're ever in the woods and you hear your own voice calling from the darkness, don't look back. Don't ever look back. The sun is going down. God help me.
Rule number 4 was specific. It was so specific that when I read it during my first hour in the tower, I laughed. I actually laughed out loud, the sound bouncing off the reinforced glass windows that offered a 360-degree view of the Shoshone National Forest. Rule number 4 read, if the wind stops blowing, but the trees are still moving, get into the emergency supply locker immediately. Do not lock the locker. Do not take your radio. Do not breathe until you hear the metal grate of the trapdoor slam shut. I'm not laughing anymore. I am writing this on the back of a topographical map with a dying pen light clamped between my teeth, and my hands are shaking so hard the lines of the mountains look like they are vibrating. It started 20 minutes ago, or maybe an hour. Time distorts when your heart is hammering against your ribs like a prisoner trying to break out of a cell. I was scanning Sector 3. The night was standard, just a deep, bruised purple sky and the endless ocean of black pines. The wind usually screams up here. At 6,000 feet, the wind is a constant companion. It rattles the window frames. It hums against the steel skeleton of the tower. It's a white noise that helps you sleep, or at least, it helps you ignore the feeling that you are the only living thing for 50 miles. Then, silence. Absolute, vacuum-sealed silence. The rattling of the window frame ceased. The low hum of the steel supports vanished. My ears popped, the way they do when the cabin pressure in an airplane drops suddenly. The silence was heavy. It felt physical, like the air had turned into gelatin.
I stood up from my chair, the screech of the legs against the wooden floor sounding like a gunshot in the quiet. I looked out at the tree line. The wind was gone. There was zero atmospheric movement, but down there, right at the edge of the clearing where the tower's shadow usually falls, the pines were thrashing. They weren't swaying gently, they were being violently shoved aside. It looked like a tank was driving through the forest, snapping trunks and tearing up roots, but there was no sound, no crunch of wood, no roar of an engine, just the silent, violent displacement of nature. And it was moving fast, straight toward the base of my tower. Rule number 4. My brain stalled. Logic tried to fight the adrenaline. Maybe it's a bear? A bear doesn't silence the wind. Maybe it's a storm front? A storm front doesn't target a single path to a lookout tower. I saw the shape break the tree line. It wasn't a tank. It wasn't a bear. It was pale. That's all I could register. A pale, elongated blur that moved with a jerking, staccato rhythm, like a stop-motion animation with missing frames. It didn't run. It glitched forward.
Panic is a cold bucket of water. I scrambled backward, knocking over my coffee mug. The dark liquid spread across the floorboards, but I didn't care. The supply locker. The heavy steel cabinet bolted to the back wall, meant to hold flares, medical kits, and bear mace. I ripped the door open. It was crammed with gear. I started tearing things out, throwing heavy plastic cases behind me. Rule 4 said, do not take the radio. My hand hovered over my walkie-talkie on the desk. The instinct to call for help was overwhelming. I wanted to scream for station command. I wanted to hear a human voice. But the rules have kept me alive for 3 weeks. I didn't question them when they told me to salt the doorframe. I didn't question them when they told me to ignore the lights in the sky on Tuesdays. I couldn't question them now. I left the radio. I squeezed myself into the metal box. It's tight. I'm 6 feet tall, and I have to fold my knees up to my chest. The smell of old canvas and metallic dust filled my nose. Rule 4, do not lock the locker. This was the hardest part. Every fiber of my survival instinct screamed at me to latch the door, to barricade it, to pile furniture against it. But the rule was specific, do not lock it. Maybe a locked door implies value. Maybe a locked door invites curiosity. Or maybe whatever is out there likes the challenge of opening a shell to get to the meat inside. I pulled the metal door shut, leaving a hairline crack. Just enough to see a sliver of the tower room, just enough to breathe. Then I waited. The silence was broken by the first sound. It wasn't a roar, it wasn't a growl. It was the sound of metal ringing. Clang. My tower is 80 feet in the air. The only way up is a steel staircase that wraps around the structure. Clang. A step. Clang. Another step. It was climbing, but the rhythm was wrong. It wasn't the steady pace of a human, and it wasn't the frantic scramble of an animal. It was step, 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 pause, step. It sounded heavy, wet, like someone slapping a raw steak against the iron grate. I counted the steps. There are 144 steps to the catwalk. I know because I count them every time I haul groceries up here. Clang. It was halfway up. I pressed my hand over my mouth. My breath was coming in short, ragged gasps. I bit my lip hard enough to taste copper, using the pain to ground myself. Then, a voice. Hey, is anyone up there? My blood froze. It was my voice. Not a similar voice, not an impression. It was my voice. It was a recording of me, played back perfectly. It was the sentence I had said into the radio 3 days ago when I thought I saw smoke in Sector 4. Hey, is anyone up there?
The creature mimicked the inflection perfectly, the slight rising pitch at the end, the static of the radio transmission woven into the vocal cords. Clang, clang, clang. It was faster now. It knew I was here. It was mocking me. Hey, is anyone up there? It repeated, but this time the tone shifted. It sounded angry, distorted, like the audio file was corrupted. "Hey, is anyone up there?" The last word was a guttural croak that vibrated in my chest. It was on the catwalk. I could hear it walking around the perimeter of the glass room. I could hear its hand or claw or whatever it had trailing along the railing, a slow, metallic screech. I squeezed my eyes shut. I didn't want to see. If I saw it through the crack in the locker, I would scream. I knew I would. The handle of the trapdoor to the main cabin rattled. I had locked the trapdoor. That was rule number 1. Always lock the trapdoor after sunset. The handle jiggled violently, metal grinding on metal. "Open up," the thing said. It wasn't my voice anymore. It was the voice of my supervisor, David. "Come on, kid. Surprise inspection. Open the hatch." It sounded exactly like him, down to the wheeze in his chest from 30 years of smoking. I almost moved. My muscle memory wanted to obey the boss. But David was in a town 40 miles away, and David wouldn't be walking up 80 feet of stairs in the dark without a flashlight beam cutting through the windows. The room remained dark, no flashlight, just the moonlight and the shadow circling outside. Bang! The trapdoor bowed upward. Bang! It hit it again, harder. The heavy iron latch groaned. Bang! Wood splintered. The lock didn't fail, but the wood holding the frame did. With a sound like a gunshot, the trapdoor flew open, slamming back against the floorboards. Silence returned. I held my breath. Rule 4: do not breathe. I pinched my nose. I clamped my mouth shut. My lungs burned. My diaphragm spasmed. I heard the wet slap of feet on the wooden floor. It was inside. The temperature in the room plummeted. I could feel the cold radiating through the thin metal of the locker. It smelled like ozone, like a blown electrical transformer mixed with the sweet, cloying scent of rotting venison. I opened my eyes, just a slit. Through the crack in the locker door, I saw it. It was standing by the desk. It was tall, too tall. Its head scraped the ceiling of the lookout. It was pale, grayish-white, pulled too tight over a skeletal frame. But it was the way it moved that broke my mind. It didn't have a distinct shape. It kept shifting. One moment, it looked like a man in a park ranger uniform, but the uniform was part of its skin, fleshy and melted.
The next moment, its limbs elongated, joints snapping backward like a grasshopper. It was touching my things. It picked up my coffee mug with fingers that were far too long, possessing too many knuckles. It brought the mug to where a face should be, but there were no eyes, just a smooth, pale surface with a vertical slit that pulsed. It sniffed the coffee. Then it crushed the ceramic mug in its hand as easily as if it were an eggshell. Dust and shards fell to the floor. It turned. It was facing the locker. I didn't move. I didn't blink. My lungs were screaming. My vision was starting to spot with black dots. I needed oxygen. I needed to exhale. The thing took a step toward me. "I know you're hiding," it whispered. This time, the voice wasn't a mimic. It was a sound that didn't belong in a throat. It sounded like dry leaves skittering on pavement. It sounded like the static between radio stations. "The rules," it hissed. "You follow the rules." It was mocking me. It knew. It knew about the list stapled to the wall. It stepped closer. I could see the texture of its skin now. It was covered in fine, translucent hairs. It leaned down. The vertical slit on its face opened. There were teeth. Rows and rows of needle-thin, translucent teeth that spiraled down into a black gullet. It was right in front of the locker. I could feel its body heat. It wasn't warm. It was fever hot, sickly hot. It reached out a hand. A long, gray finger extended toward the locker handle. My chest was going to explode.
The biological need to breathe was overriding my fear. My diaphragm jerked. I let out the tiniest, microscopic stream of air through my nose. The finger stopped. The creature froze. It tilted its head, like a dog listening to a high-pitched whistle. It stayed like that for an eternity, the finger hovering inches from the metal door, the slit on its face quivering. Then, the radio on the desk, the one I had left behind, squawked. Unit 4, this is dispatch. Routine check-in, over. The sound was deafening in the small room. The creature snapped its head toward the desk. The movement was instant, a blur of motion. It forgot about the locker. It forgot about the sound of my breath. It lunged at the radio. It didn't answer it. It didn't smash it. It just stared at the glowing green light of the receiver. Unit 4, please respond. Over. The creature leaned into the microphone. It pressed the talk button with a delicate, wet finger. It didn't speak. It just breathed into the mic, a wet, rattling wheeze that sounded like drowning. Then it released the button. It stood up to its full height, bones popping and rearranging. It looked around the room one last time. Its gaze swept over the locker, but it didn't focus. The radio had distracted it. The radio had satisfied some strange curiosity. It walked to the open trapdoor. It didn't climb down, it just fell. It stepped into the hole and dropped. I didn't hear it hit the stairs. I didn't hear it hit the ground 80 feet below. Just silence. Then, slowly, the wind returned. The window frames started to rattle. The low hum of the steel supports came back. The air pressure normalized. I have been in this locker for 3 hours. I haven't moved. I wet myself, and I don't care. I have the topographical map and this pen light, and I am writing this because I don't think it's gone. Rule number 4 said wait for the trapdoor to slam shut. The trapdoor is still open. I can see the square of darkness in the floor. It's a gaping mouth. I can't hear the creature. I can't hear the footsteps. But the rule is absolute. Do not breathe until you hear the metal grate of the trapdoor slam shut. I am taking shallow breaths, tiny sips of air, but I can't leave. I can't move to close the door myself. That would break the rule. So I sit here, folded into a box, waiting for a door to close that was broken off its hinges. I think it's waiting too. I think it's hanging off the side of the tower, just out of sight, clinging to the steel like a spider, waiting for me to step out. And the worst part? The radio is crackling again, but it's not dispatch. Come out, the radio whispers. We have new rules. The sun didn't rise that final morning. It bled into the sky. It was a bruised purple shade that I have never seen before and hope to never see again. According to rule number 9, I wasn't allowed to unlock the trapdoor until the light hit the specific knot in the floorboards near the stove. I sat there for 3 hours, gripping a coffee mug that had long since gone cold, watching that knot. I could hear them outside. Usually, the things in the woods, the mimics, the wanderers, whatever the hell the ranger station wants to call them, usually they leave before dawn. But on your last day, I think they know. They know you are leaving their domain, and they get desperate. There was a scratching sound running up the stilts of the tower. It sounded like wet fingernails dragging against dry wood. I didn't look out the windows. Rule number 3 says never look out the windows if you hear the scratching, even if it sounds like your mother calling your name. And it did. It sounded exactly like my mom, who has been dead for 5 years, screaming that she was falling. I stared at the knot in the wood. I counted the seconds. I breathed in the smell of propane and old dust, trying to ground myself in reality. Finally, a beam of sickly yellow light cut across the room and illuminated the floor. The scratching stopped instantly. The screaming cut off as if someone had pulled a plug. I didn't pack. I had packed 3 days ago. I grabbed my duffel bag, keyed the radio one last time, and said the required sign-off phrase. Tower 4 is clear. Shift ended.
Good luck. There was no static, just a clear, crisp voice that replied, "See you soon." That wasn't the standard reply. The standard reply is, "Copy that, proceed to extraction point." My stomach dropped so hard I thought I might throw up right there on the catwalk. "See you soon." I tried to rationalize it. Maybe it was a new guy on the dispatch. Maybe it was a joke. I unlocked the trapdoor. The air that rushed up wasn't fresh morning air. It smelled like copper and ozone, like the air right before a lightning strike. I climbed down the ladder, my knuckles white, my eyes fixed strictly on the rungs. Don't look down at the forest floor until your feet touch the dirt. That wasn't a written rule, that was just survival instinct. I felt a heat on my back, like a spotlight was trained on me, or a dozen pairs of eyes burning holes through my jacket. When my boots hit the gravel, I didn't run. Running triggers the predator drive. Everyone knows that. I walked. I walked with a purpose, head down, eyes scanning the trail for tripwires or snares. The hike back to my Jeep was 4 miles, the longest 4 miles of my life. The woods were silent. Not the peaceful silence of a library, but the holding breath silence of an ambush.
No birds, no wind in the pines, just the crunch of my boots. About 2 miles in, I saw the deer. It was standing in the middle of the trail, a buck, massive, with antlers that looked like tangled roots. It was staring at me, but its eyes were wrong. They were forward-facing, like a predator, like a human. Rule number 7, if you see wildlife acting unnaturally, yield the right of way. Do not make eye contact. I stared at my boots. I stepped off the trail, into the brush. I could feel the tickle of ferns against my legs. I walked a wide semicircle around the thing. I could hear it breathing. It was a wet, rattling rattle in its chest. As I passed it, a voice, low, guttural, sounding like it was vibrating out of a deep cavern, whispered, "Not yet." I didn't stop. I didn't look. I merged back onto the trail and I walked faster. My heart was hammering against my ribs so hard I could hear the blood rushing in my ears. The keys to my Jeep were already in my hand, clenched so tight the metal bit into my palm. When I saw the sun glinting off the windshield of my Cherokee, I almost cried. It was covered in pollen and bird dropping, the most beautiful thing I had ever seen. I unlocked it, threw my bag in the back, and jumped in. I locked the doors before I even put the key in the ignition. The engine sputtered. My heart stopped. Please, not now. Not like this. I turned the key again. It roared to life. I threw it in reverse, tires spinning on the gravel, and tore out of that parking lot. I didn't look in the rearview mirror until I hit the paved county road 10 miles away. When I finally checked the mirror, the back seat was empty. The road behind me was empty. I drove for 6 hours straight. I didn't stop until I hit a gas station 2 states over. It was one of those massive truck stops, full of bright fluorescent lights and normal people. I stood in the aisle staring at the beef jerky for 20 minutes, just letting the banal commercial reality wash over me. The kid behind the counter looked at me weird. I probably looked like a maniac, unshaven, dark circles under my eyes, smelling like fear and pine needles. He asked me if I needed a bag. I flinched. I paid cash. I didn't want a paper trail. Not yet. I got back to my apartment 3 days ago. I haven't turned on the TV. I haven't answered my phone. I sleep with the lights on. I thought that leaving the tower meant I left the rules behind. I thought the contract ended when I clocked out. But last night, I woke up at 3:33 a.m., the exact time the night walker used to tap on the glass of the lookout. I woke up because I heard tapping. Not on a window, on my bedroom door. I live alone. I have 3 deadbolts on my front door. I checked them before bed. The tapping was rhythmic. 3 slow taps. A pause. 3 fast taps. I lay there, paralyzed, under my duvet. I reverted to the training. I didn't make a sound. I controlled my breathing. Then I saw it, under the crack of the bedroom door. A shadow, But the light in the hallway wasn't on. The shadow was darker than the dark. It was standing there, just outside. And then, a piece of paper slid under the door. I waited until the sun came up. I waited until I could hear the traffic outside, the normal sounds of the city, garbage trucks, honking cars. I got out of bed, grabbed my baseball bat, and opened the door. The hallway was empty. The front door was still locked and bolted from the inside. I picked up the paper. It was a standard termination of contract form. It was signed by the ranger, but at the bottom, in handwriting that looked like it had been scratched with a claw, there was a new addition, a postscript. It read, "Rule number 15. The job isn't over until we say it is. Keep the door locked tonight. We're coming to collect the uniform." I burned the uniform in my bathtub an hour ago. I don't know if that makes it better or worse. I'm writing this now because I need a record. If you see a job listing for a fire lookout in the Bitterroot National Forest, don't take it. The pay is incredible. The solitude is tempting. But the tax they take out of you isn't money. They take pieces of your mind. The sun is going down now. The street lights are flickering on. They look different tonight. They have that same purple hue the sky had on my last morning. I'm going to go lock the door now. I have to put the salt line down. I have to cover the mirrors. I don't think I survived. I think I just moved to a bigger cage. I can hear the scratching again. It's coming from inside the walls this time. If I stop typing, it means they found a way in. Don't look at the moon tonight. It looks like an eye. Goodbye.